Our next to-doodle is about real life situations with rounding. We have a little review here. Rounding is a tool to get rid of fake extra accuracy. We know how to round. Sometimes we estimate at the beginning, and that limits our accuracy. Sometimes we have tools we use like a handsaw or a pharmacy scale that tell us how much accuracy we have. If we don't know how much to round to, then just the general rule says use the same number of significant place value digits as what you started the problem with. But I was cheating with my examples and used decimal place values, and we're not supposed to really do decimals yet. So when in real life do we round to whole number place values? So let's explore that. We're going to take situations out of the basket. There's just a whole bunch of jumble of things that if I grab one, becomes more clear when they're not stacked in a mess. And we're just going to sort them. Should we round that to a 10, 100, 1,000, 100,000, or a million? And we'll talk about them as we go. So I don't necessarily think they're all as interesting to everybody, but if we want to talk about some more than others, we can. So feel free to just grab one of these and see what it is, and then we'll put it. So the first one I grabbed was the Oregon annual state budget. How much do you think that's rounded to?
Nearest million?
Millions. That is right. Yep. I don't happen to know how many millions. I could use Google and find out, but that's a million kind of number. How many people do you think of one that should be or more, $1 or more in a lottery?
To the nearest million.
A million people have done that? I'm not sure.
I don't know. Well, a lot of people play the lottery. I won a lot of dollars back, so I don't know.
I'm going to do a quick search and find out. How many people win the lottery? It looks like there's about 1,600.
Oh, wow.
So there we go. That's over there. US annual bathtub drownings. That's kind of depressing. How many people do you think drown in a bathtub every year?
100.
What did you say? Sorry.
To the nearest 100.
Yes, it's more than 100, but less than 1,000. It's actually on average, I have a list of these terrible fatalities, but 300 or 400. Here's another red one. Annual murders using bladed weapons. To make
nearest 1,000.
1,000, yeah. I tried to make these easier by not having nothing that's 10,000. It's either 1,000 or 100,000 for those. Murders with rifles and shotguns, since we're on the murders.
To the nearest 100 of 1,000.
It's actually less than 1,000. So it's either hundreds or thousands. Usually it's little more than 500, so it'd round up to the nearest 1,000. LCC students, let's take something more positive for a moment. Anyone know how many people are at LCC?
To the nearest.
I'd say 1,000.
Yes. It's tens of thousands. LCC has between 10 and 30,000 people based on how badly the economy is doing. but we tend to report it to the nearest thousand. That's how we round it. We will say 31,000 or 12,000, not 12,500. Okay, US annual children kidnapped by family. We're back to troublesome numbers.
To the nearest 100.
Sadly, it is over 200,000.
That's what I was thinking at first, but it's terrible.
It is terrible. Okay, students in the 4J school district.
To the nearest 10.
In a classroom, it would be tens, right? My class has 20 or 30, but in the whole school district, it's also thousands. Okay, red depressing ones. Suicides. How many suicides are in the country each year?
Hundreds of thousands.
Thankfully not. It's only tens of thousands. So I'm going to put it with just thousands here. So it's usually between 40 and 50,000, but again, reported to be 44 or 51 or something, rounded to the nearest thousand. Oh, I want something nice. Give me a blue one. There we go. The total population of Oregon.
500,000. Or is that too little? I guess that would just be Eugene.
Yeah, that's it. So Eugene isn't quite that big.
Nearest
Portland
million?
is about 600,000 or 700,000. Yes, it's in the millions. It's about 4 million. Okay, annual defensive gun use events. This one is hard to get an accurate number for because the police don't keep track of it the way they do crimes. But including just scaring people away by showing them that you have a gun. How many annual defensive gun uses do you think there are?
To the nearest 1,000.
1,000, yes. Estimates range from about 50,000 to 100,000. US annual COVID deaths.
To the nearest 100. I don't know. Probably way more. Well, maybe 1,000 as well, maybe.
It's actually hundreds of thousands. I don't want to get into a political debate about how many people with COVID deaths are from COVID or with COVID, but it is a big number. There are things that are killing more people, like heart disease and cancer, but it is a big number. Okay, lung disease deaths. I just sort of gave that one away. That is also hundreds of thousands. Murders using handguns. Where should we put that one?
To the
The
nearest.
nearest 1,000. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna
Yeah,
say that
nearest
too.
1,000. It's about 10,000. There are many more times that people avoid a crime than commit a murder using a gun. But that's kind of a biased thing to say because we're comparing defensive of any crime versus aggression with only a murder. Okay, heart disease deaths. That's like lung disease. That's a huge number. It's almost up to 1 million, but we don't round it to the nearest million. We say 690,000 or something like that. Okay, cancer deaths, same kind of thing. It's more than 500,000, but we don't round it to the nearest million. How much to fill a family car's gas tank?
The nearest 100.
Could be. For me, it's usually tens. It costs me 40 or 50 or 60.
So
Not-
it would be depending on the type of car.
So I think for most cars it's tens, but if you had a big truck or a camper, then it could certainly be hundreds. Portland's population, I had given that one away earlier. That's hundreds of thousands. The US population, anyone know what that is?
So the nearest million.
Yes, it's clearly that, because even Oregon was more than 1 million. Yeah, it's about 330 million. Someone's annual salary, how do we round our salaries when we talk about them, if we have them?
So the nearest 10.
I think most people do it to the thousand. I make 10,000 a year, or 20,000, or 30,000. A monthly rent.
The nearest 100.
100. Yeah, most people talk about their rents with, I pay 500 a month in rent or 900 a month in rent. House prices, that one we talked about already. It tends to be in thousands just because of the closing costs. Questions about any of this? Okay. So this one is, there's numbers we sometimes round and sometimes don't. So I'm just going to grab a grocery bill. Do we always round our grocery bills if I was to talk about it with a friend? Do we never round a grocery bill? Sometimes do we round a grocery bill and say my groceries were about 50 or 60 or 80, even though it wasn't because I'm rounding?
Sometimes.
Sometimes. So your homework is just to finish this Venn diagram. Just grab one of these and put it in the never, always, or sometimes. And when this happens, then rather than try and type things out, although you could certainly turn this into a typing things out, it's probably quickest to send me a screenshot. So if you're doing this on a phone, do your normal phone way of taking a screenshot. If you're doing it with a computer, then on Windows, it's Shift Windows S. On a Mac, it's Command Shift 4, lets you draw a rectangle, and then you can paste that into an email. If you have a way to text on your computer, then you can paste it into a text, but not everyone has that. And then the last slide, oops, nope, I'm sorry, this slide. Sometimes it's useful to round up and sometimes it's useful to round down. So this one I want to do with us, at least half of them. If a store manager wants to make plans about how profitable a store has to be in the black, not hemorrhaging money for that year, should it round the prices on the store up or down when doing that kind of estimation?
What does in the black mean? Like,
In the black. So if I am running a typical retail store, then for most of the year, my store has lost money. It costs more money to pay my employees and rent and utilities and all of that than it does with what I earn. And then at the end of the year, as people start shopping for the holidays or shopping for clothing for kids going back to school or things like that, it's the last few months of the year when the store overall is making a profit for the year. The store has to earn enough money at the end of one year to carry it through the beginning of the next year when sales are low. Does that make sense so far? So that's why Thanksgiving weekend is, the shopping is called Black Friday, because traditionally that's the weekend that most stores in the country will finally be, quote, in the black. The coloring of red versus black came from the tradition when red and black ink was the only colors of ink that was cheap, and we didn't have all these fun pens like today. So the people that were writing out their store budgets, like a checkbook kind of thing, on keeping the books, they would use red for negative numbers and black for positive numbers, because red was like alarming, right? Like a red stop sign. So, oh no, we are still losing money. And then finally, when the store was profitable, they could use their black pen. So that's where Black Friday and in the black comes from. So in this case, the store owner should round it down. I'm going to take my circle and put it on up or down. If he's rounding up, then all those rounding ups might make the store look like it has sold more money than it has. If the store is making an extra 40 cents on every sale, those 40 cents might add up, and the owner thinks that things are good when they're not. By rounding down, the owner can be cautious, and if anything, plan to have to sell a little more than necessary to not go out of business. Okay, the second one, when an engineer is considering an elevator's weight limit, should the average person's weight be rounded up or down? Because you've seen signs in elevators, capacity 6 people or something like that.
Round it up.
Round it up, yes. If I'm wondering whether this is an elevator for 5 people or 6 people or 7 people, if I assume they're all kind of heavy people, then I'm not going to have too many people get in the elevator, at least if they follow the directions on the sign. If I say people are 100 pounds, then more people are going to try and cram in the elevator, and it might cause a problem. If I say people are 200 pounds, then the sign will say only a few people should be in the elevator and it will be safer. Make sense for the rest of this page? Okay, and then you're typing out questions. List 2 situations in which you use rounding in real life. Do you follow the normal rules for rounding, or was there some special thing about the situation that made you always want to round up or down? And were there any consequences if you didn't use rounding or rounded incorrectly? Were you just rounding because it was convenient to talk about things that way? Like, I'm rounding how much I paid for gas in my car because I don't remember exactly. Or are you rounding in a way that could cause problems, like you're designing an elevator? Those questions make sense? Okay. I will stop the recording.